Well, just when people are starting to say, whatever happened to Julian Cope, he's back with a new record label, a new album, St Julian, and a couple of hit singles already in Britain. Julian, are you looking forward to being a pop star all over again?
No, I'm not looking forward to it at all. I like me a lot more than I used to. I don't think I'll really fall into that trap that they laid for me last time.
Do you think it's something that, in a sense, you have to go through once to be able to cope with properly?
I don't know, because I think a lot of people don't get the second chance. So although I say I'm completely aware of the pitfalls, there's certain things that I guess I still relish. I said at the time that I wanted all the 14-year-old girls to sod off, which they did. But they're all 20 now, so maybe they'll still be around, maybe once they've got over the embarrassment of their ex-favourite pop star coming back, they'll get into it.
Have you been writing songs with a view to having hit singles and a hit album?
I always write songs the way that I feel, which is great, like, as a kind of an autobiographical thing. It's great because you look back at your library of records and you've got almost like a diary of this is the way that I felt in 1981, etc. These songs I have certainly got a far more commercial awareness. But then again, a lot of it came out of doing albums like Fried. That you do an album like Fried, which is really a catalogue of my depressions. And if you really write songs, if you really write the way you say you write, and you are autobiographical, unfortunately you come out of it and you start feeling snotty after a while. You can only feel depressed for so long, I think.
There must be something autobiographical, I would guess, about the song Well Shut Your Mouth, which we'll hear now, because as well as being a track on St Julian and a single, it's also the title of one of your other solo albums.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's the story of the first solo album. I always thought Well Shut Your Mouth as a song by a very small artist, was a completely different statement. It seemed to be more like a Russian dissident railing against the state. It was quite pathetic in a way, because there was very little chance of ever being heard. The idea of World Shut Your Mouth was so entire that it was, preposterous. It was really sad, and that's the way I saw it. And I always prided myself that I never wrote anthems, that I wasn't the boss, Mac and I, in our Liverpool days, always used to talk about Wiley as being the crass one, and then he went and wrote the Story of the Blues, and we all went, bloody hell, he was the crass one. Unfortunately, I think I might have come up with a bit of an anthem. I like it for its mindlessness. It's pure Americana in a way. It's the isolationist dream, isn't it?
Let's hear it now. Julian, you mentioned Mac, who's singer in Echo and the Bunnymen, and Pete Wiley of Wah. Journalists love to look back on, or in fact identify at the time, movements in music, don't they?
Yeah.
And you were identified in that period, sort of late 70s, early 80s, that there was something happening in Liverpool.
Mm.
Looking back on it, was there really, or was it just a coincidence?
No, I think it's a few things. There was a lot of coincidence, but there was a lot of... I guess that there was very much a Liverpool scene. There were a lot of people who liked the other people around them, but their rivalry was very, very intense. I do find it kind of strange that there's only like one person of our scene who hasn't been on Top of the Pops, who hasn't had a chart hit. Normally you get a couple of people out of a scene who have the commercial success. The others go on and become, ephemeral figures. But for everybody to have been so successful, I think there's only Jane Casey from Pink Military who hasn't had a big commercial hit. It was very incestuous. It was a good time. It was the first place that I made sense, because I came out of Tamworth in 1976, went to college, and we all met at the White Riot gig, the Clash and the Slits. And although everybody had been there before, everybody was too snotty to say hello to each other. And I think that was the day that the Liverpool scene really started. I was dancing in front of Wiley, and I kept dancing on his feet, and he wouldn't push me away, so I thought it was a tremendously wimpy act. So I just pogoed in front of him for a while, staring at him, and eventually he dragged me out, which I thought was quite good, and we had a bit of a fight, and then he said, "Do you want to be in a group?" And from that period, I think the Liverpool scene started. You'd got all the people who looked like dudes, which was me, Mac, Wiley, the early Teardrops, who were completely obsessed by music. And we taught people like Pete Burns and Holly and all that lot about music. They taught us about how to not look like a dude. So there was a lot of cross-flow between those two things.
What sort of music were you listening to in those days?
Pre-punk. Pre-punk was very much German music, I guess. Tamworth was very much into Can and Faust and Neu. And we listened to the Velvet Underground, and I had Doors albums. I remember being, yeah, but very much raw power, not really Stooges albums. It was like the later stuff, which was pretty much raw power. But I remember being ridiculed for having Doors albums, which now, looking back, seems crazy in the days of, Deep Purple and stuff like that. If it wasn't a Hammond in Tamworth, you couldn't listen to it. But going to Liverpool was so important, because there were other people who knew who Iggy Pop was. There were people who knew about things like Hallo Gallo by Neu. They were obscure things. Sometimes you'd be purposely obscure just so that you didn't have to dance to Money at the party.
Do you think in those days you could have imagined yourself writing a song like Trampoline?
I don't know. There's always been a bit of Merle Haggard in me. So I always wanted to be older than I was. I used to get really down when I'd do photos and I'd be giving it loads of, looking really as hard as I could. And I ended up looking, like a 12-year-old. I used to think, cope looking like Morrison. I like being older. My voice is better. My face is better. My physique is better. And my music was always about me, which was always quite an ungainly subject. And I like the way that I've adapted ungainliness into a certain chic, which I think that I've done quite well now. It's taken a long while. I think my muse is quite thorough, really. People always accuse me of being, oh yeah, you're whimsical, eccentric, English, etc., etc. But I think I've always tried to be as pertinent as possible, even in the more strange moments.
Let's have a listen to Trampoline. From St. Julian, that's Julian Cope and Trampoline. Julian, anybody who's hearing you talk for the first time and hearing that you are an articulate and lucid person will be surprised if all they've read is those articles that describe you as a bit dippy, a bit of a fruitcake.
Mm.
Did you actually go through a phase where even you doubted your own sanity?
I went through periods of intense paranoia. I actually got very scared of coming to London for a while and got a bit agoraphobic. A lot of that was chemical, and it's the kind of thing that you're not aware of until afterwards. I was never unable to speak. I was never unable to string sentences together. I did get the impression around Fried that people thought Julian Cope makes this music because it's all that he's capable of, which I resented the hell out of. There was always... I always did things by design. The only way that you can write about the intensity of the feelings that you have, especially the depression that I had, was to make the sleeve as ungainly as possible, to make the music as brittle as it possibly could be. There's no point in kind of souping it up. If you're going to look ugly, you might as well look disgustingly ugly. It's like... I think because so many people spend their lives trying to look as good as they can, they can't really entertain the idea of publicly looking crap, publicly looking quite gross. And I always think that the art has got to be a distended version of normality. Whenever I've done something, if I write about it, or even if I tell the story to somebody, because I was there, I have to romance that story a little bit, to give that person who wasn't there a certain amount of the atmosphere. So if I'm telling you a story about, you know, being in Los Angeles, the mere fact that you weren't in Los Angeles means that I have to push that story a little bit more. So you'd get people like Mark Smith from The Fall, who would tell it like it was. Sometimes he'd hit the mark perfectly, but sometimes he would miss it completely, because it was so, this is the way I feel, and it was down the line. There was no romance in it at all. And I've always been aware of the fact that people getting into artists are really enjoying their most extreme sides of their life by proxy. You know, because a lot of people don't have the time to go through the hell that they know is kind of semi-appealing. So you get people, a 15-year-old who's into Iggy Pop, he knows that, you know, he can't be going back to Detroit all the time and getting out off his head, so he's got Iggy Pop to do it. And he doesn't just want to feel like Iggy Pop, maybe he wants to feel like, you know, Nick Drake. So you've got somebody like Nick Drake who is incredibly repressed. And that's the way that I see art. And my little bit of art falls flat on its face every so often. But at least it falls flat on its face. It doesn't, it's not a half-arsed thing.
The classic pop star interview, at this point, starts going down the road that says Julian Cope, in inverted commas, the wasted years, in which you lament this drug-induced torpor that you went through. Do you? I mean, I suspect, listening to your new music, that it's a lot more vibrant. It sounds like it's made by a healthier person.
It's made by a physically more active person, a person who likes getting up in the morning. But I'm not going to deny any of those pasts. I used to get really bored when people would come back healthier, wealthier, and wiser. You know, I mean, I'm wiser, but I wouldn't be wiser if I hadn't done all that. There's a lot of crap that I had to go through to become this. I am a white Anglo-Saxon male Protestant dude when it comes down to it, and I'm writing from the point of view of what a lot of people would say is a very smug position. It's easy to have a tremendous depression if you're having that depression in the confines of a carpeted, warm living room. And I'm writing from that point of view, and that's the lowest it ever gets to. So I'm not writing, you know, as a Delta blues man or as an unmarried black pregnant woman who's living in Brixton. And that's why I used to get down with groups like Tears for Fears, because they were sitting in Bath going, oh God, you know, Daddy's only given me $8.50 this week. And it's that kind of thing, you have to get down on it. That's where St. Julian came in, because St. Julian, to me, was the character from Fried, who goes up on the hillside. He looks down and he says, okay, this is the city over here. I'm not going to be around here for a while. I'm okay, under Michelle, everything's cool. But then after a while, as is the way of the Western male, he starts thinking more that not only is he doing okay up here, but maybe he's got the answers as well. And he starts getting a bit smug. And in pure, typical evangelist spirit, comes riding back into the town, going, you never believe it, but I think I've got the answer. And that's the way St. Julian is. St. Julian he's a dude, he really is. He's the evangelical character, he's the Jim Jones, who has got the answer and gets it slightly wrong. And people always they're always saying, yeah, but is that St. Julian or is that you? And I don't know, because there's a tremendous irony about St. Julian, but I don't know where it starts and when it finishes.
I think we should hear that song now.
Okay.